Hi, I'm Brendan from the Luxury Pergola, and we're going to talk about mounting a permanent outdoor structure. So what is the importance of mounting a permanent outdoor structure? Well, it's permanent. If you don't mount it, let's say you have a gazebo and you just put it on the ground, as soon as you get a heavy wind, it's flying away to the magical land of Oz. When you are mounting any kind of permanent outdoor structure, you have to think about what are your points of failure. So the first one is going to be the screws to fasten it down. If you have no screws, obviously it's going to fly away. You could either embed the posts in concrete, so that being you pour some concrete, put your post in, and let the concrete cure around that post. That is by far the most difficult option. You could also use a base plate or some other fastener to fasten your unit or your post to concrete, wood, whatever. That would be your first point of failure. You want to make sure that those screws or fasteners are as strong as possible so that they don't pull up out of whatever material they are screwed into. The next potential fail point is something called moment of overturn. What is moment of overturn? A measure of the potential for a force to cause a structure to tip over around a pivot point, usually at or near its foundation. So where is that tension going to be on your post base, frame, when you get a heavy wind load or somebody runs into it and it starts to push that post over? So you need to make sure that that is strengthened and reinforced so your moment of overturn is as strong as possible. Now let's get into how to mount it, and we'll start with what surface you're mounting your structure to. So there's a right way and wrong way to do this, and we get asked about usually the following things: a concrete pad, a wooden or composite deck, pavers, or footings that they would dig themselves. So let's start with best case, 100% ideal way to do it. Best way to do it, obviously, is to pour footers. Now, what is a footer? A footer is where you basically dig a big hole in the ground and fill it up with concrete. Now, the dimensions of that hole are going to be defined by your local building codes, which is going to be influenced by wind load, snow load, that kind of thing, as well as if you have a frost line. So if you are in Minnesota, let's say, you're going to have to get a lot deeper because the ground is going to freeze. And you want to avoid something called frost heaving, where the ground is going to move up and down based on freezing and thawing. If you're in Florida, depth isn't really as big of a deal, but you need to make sure you have enough concrete to act as a counterweight when you get the wind gusts coming in. So what do you do if you have a concrete pad? Well, it really depends. If you plan to get a permit, the city is almost certainly going to tell you to core cut, which is get a big concrete saw, cut out sections of your concrete pad, and dig and pour that footer. Let's say you're not the permitting type. Then in that case, what you're going to have to do is fasten it down to the concrete pad itself. What you give up in that case is that frost heaving flexibility. Because the concrete pad usually sits on top of the ground, it is going to shift and move as the ground freezes. You also may not get as much counterweight. It really depends on how everything is poured. Usually a concrete pad is going to be about 4.5 inches thick. In most cases, yours may vary, and that will act as the counterweight for the pergola. We've had plenty of people attach it just to their concrete pad, so that is always an option, but make sure you do your due diligence before making that decision. The next one we hear a lot is decks. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer for this. Every deck is built usually differently. You have different floor joist layouts, you have different boards on top. It really just depends how you do it. So what we're going to do is go over some things that we've seen in the past. Don't assume that this is exactly what you need to do. Please talk to a local expert. They're going to be the ones who can tell you exactly what you need to do. This will just give you some ideas. The first thing that is definitely an easy rule for everybody is never mount it to just the deck boards. The deck boards themselves are not structural components. If you attach to just the deck boards, it is not securely fastened. It will fly away if you get a heavy wind. And not only will it take the pergola with it, or the gazebo, or whatever you mounted to your deck boards, it'll probably take some deck boards with it as well. So the first way to approach this is something called blocking. It is where you take more, let's say your floor joists are made out of wood, you take more wood and fill in that space between the floor joists that the post is going to fall on. Basically, it's just layers of sandwiched wood all between the floor joists to help transfer the load of the post into the frame of the deck. Another option is to actually drop your post through the deck boards to where it is flush with your floor joists, where you will then through bolt it through your floor joists and through the frame member of that post. What if I have a vinyl or aluminum deck? For a vinyl deck, hopefully your floor joists are not vinyl. They're almost never vinyl. It would be a pressure-treated wood, usually wrapped in something to keep it waterproof. Same idea if you have a vinyl deck. Make sure that your floor joists and the structural members are not vinyl so that you can tie everything together. If it is vinyl, do not mount anything to it. It will not be strong enough to handle any kind of permanent structure. If you have, let's say, an aluminum or steel substructure, or even deck boards, you'll obviously have to go around the deck boards into the substructure and tie everything together there. Please get a local expert to handle that. It is not an easy process. Another question we get a lot is, can I attach this to a paver patio? No. Never, ever, ever attach it directly to pavers and assume that'll be fine. It is exactly the same principles if you were to take your outdoor structure, sit it out in the middle of the yard, not attached to anything, and cross your fingers and hope it works. There is not enough counterweight to handle that. What you're gonna have to do is lift up those pavers where the post is going to land. Once you do that, dig your footer. After you dig your footer, let the concrete cure, attach the pergola structure to those concrete piers, and then, to make it look pretty, come back around and cut the pavers around the post. That'll give you a really, really seamless look. We actually have some video where you can see somebody who did that, and it looks really nice. It just takes a little more care, and if you are doing a whole backyard renovation and you're planning a paver patio, I highly recommend you put in that structure first and then come back with the pavers. Otherwise, you're just gonna be doing some work twice. Another question we get is attaching it to a house. Is this possible? Yeah. Is it easy to do? No. Every house is built differently. You may have a different stud layout where it's 16 on center or 18 on center. I've even seen 24 on center. That's for some of the more modern houses. With that stud layout, it is impossible to standardize. It is also impossible to standardize in terms of the building codes for what is needed in your area. So, attaching it to a house, yeah, it's possible. Just make sure you have a local expert, or if you're really, really handy, you already know what I'm talking about with 16 and 18 on center. If that is jargon to you, don't try to do it yourself. It is going to be a big problem. If you are attaching it to the house, let's say you have vinyl siding, you're gonna have to remove the vinyl siding where the beam from any outdoor structure is going to attach to the house. Reason being, one, it looks better. You don't want to pinch that vinyl siding, it's going to look really ugly. Additionally, you want that post to be as close to the studs as humanly possible. The reason why is when the wind blows, that beam is going to start to shift. If you have a lot of distance between the framing members or the studs and the beam itself, you introduce leverage. So when the wind blows, or let's say you have a heavy snow load on top of your outdoor structure, it is going to try to work those lag bolts out of your framing members or out of the studs. The reason you want it super close is it minimizes potential leverage and keeps that frame beam as tight to the studs as humanly possible. And finally, some last-minute tips when installing your outdoor structure. First, obviously make sure to square and plumb. Now, what does plumb mean? I'm not talking about a fruit. It is where the posts are perfectly straight up and down. So the way to check that is just get a long level, let's say a 3 or 6 foot level, put it on the post, make sure that little bubble is right between the lines. To check if your unit is square, what you do is you get a diagonal measurement from the inside corner of one post to the other. And if the two diagonals are the same, your unit is square. The other thing, do not do threaded rod before you have your unit. We've had some people who are pouring their footers and they put threaded rod into that concrete waiting for the pergola to arrive. Now with our unit, you would have to have 16 different threaded rods. The likelihood that you get those exactly right, exactly square, and in the right orientation is basically 0. And if you are going to do threaded rod, make sure you have your structure first. That'll tell you where the holes need to go. Then use a rotary hammer to drill out your holes, then put your threaded rod in with some epoxy, then you'll be good with threaded rod. But do not embed the threaded rod into the concrete ahead of time. That is a recipe for disaster. With a high quality outdoor structure like ours and the 16 different mounting points to keep everything down, make sure you build the unit before you drill it. Build your outside frame and then drill your holes to make sure they're in the right spot. And finally, don't deviate from the instructions. If a manufacturer says, hey, this is how you should do it, make sure that's what you do. If you try to get creative, you probably are gonna mess something up. So make sure you just follow their instructions. If you have any questions, At least with us, you can give us a call and we can walk you through some things. With the other guys, I don't know. So if you're in the market for an outdoor structure that's permanent and actually handles some wind ratings, give us a call or check us out at theluxurypergola.com. Our pergola experts are there to talk you through anything. Just this last weekend, I talked to several people about this exact topic, which is why we're making the video.